Hi and welcome back to my channel. In this video I am going to make a carbon fiber bracket to replace this aluminium bracket. This bracket purpose is to hold the gauge cluster and to give some stiffness to the front fairing on the motorcycle. I always get excited when I see an aluminium part replaced by carbon fiber. That is where you can see the advantage of carbon fiber, like the weight saving, which is greater, or if the part is built correctly, it can be stronger than aluminium. Also, don't forget it upgrades the look. Certainly, when it comes to the mold making process, using masking tape strategically can be a valuable technique. Before applying masking tape, it's crucial to ensure that the pattern or the object being molded has a clean and smooth surface. Any debris can affect the mold quality. I am always using masking tape to protect or highlight specific areas on the pattern that require attention, and perfect to define parting lines on the pattern. Masking tape also serves the practical purpose of simplifying the cleanup process. It can be easily removed from the pattern and doesn't leave a residue, making the transition from the pattern to mold smoother. Using a hot glue gun with fluid board in the mold making process. You can use the hot glue gun to easily and precisely create molds on the fluid board. The hot glue bonds well to the board and quickly solidifies, giving you a sturdy and customizable mold. This method is fantastic for making unique shapes or replicate intricate details. The fluid board provides a lightweight yet durable base for your mold, and the hot glue ensures that everything stays in place. Plus, it's way more forgiving than some other molding materials, and you can easily peel away the glue from the fluid board once your mold is set. It's like crafting with safety net. Okay, so let's chat about filleting wax now. Filleting wax is pretty handy material when it comes to creating molds because it helps you achieve smooth, rounded edges and corners in your designs. What's cool about filleting wax is its pliability. You can easily mold and shape it with your fingers or tools, making it great for achieving those subtle transitions between different surfaces. It's like the icing on the cake for your mold making process. It also provides a bit of buffer, preventing sharp angles that might cause issues when you're demolding your masterpiece. Last but not certainly least, I joined a few wax pyramids to the mold base. Imagine this, you got your first mold part and you're ready to join it with the second one. But there's a gap, a tiny hiccup in your mold adventure. That's where the wax pyramids step in. They act like these awesome connectors, ensuring a snug fit between the two mold pieces. And once those wax pyramids are in place and filleted to perfection, your two-part mold becomes a dream team. It's like they were meant to be together. Then I started applying the CR1 chemical release agent. I brushed 3 coats onto the part with 15 minutes drying time between each coat. The last coat I left for at least an hour to dry. For the Gelcoat, I used a high temperature Gelcoat from Easy Composites. This Gelcoat is made with focus on thermal stability. It's designed to maintain its structural integrity and aesthetic properties under high temperatures, making it suitable for scenarios where standard Gelcoats might struggle. Beyond its heat resistance, you can expect good chemical resistance. I measured twice 40 grams of the grey stuff as I applied 2 coats over the part surface. To make the most of this Gelcoat, I used a small brush to apply it on the surface. The small brush gives you better control, allowing you to navigate intricate details on your mold with precision. A thick Gelcoat can present a challenge, but it's not a roadblock. Working in thin, even layers, it might take a couple of coats to build up the desired thickness. Patience is key here. Rushing can lead to uneven application and potential issues down the line. I watch out for any bubbles or streaks as I go along. I wait until the surface gets tacky, then I use a very small amount of high temperature laminating resin to develop a better bond between the Gelcoat and the moulding patty which comes next. I measured 10 grams of resin and the right amount of hardener and I mixed them thoroughly. Lightly brushed it over the Gelcoat just enough to stick. Instead of trying to cover everything in one go, apply thin even layers. This approach minimizes the risk of excess epoxy running, especially in vertical surfaces. This extra layer of epoxy will help to bond the moulding patty onto the Gelcoat even more. After, I measured out the moulding patty. I used 750 grams in total in the area. Now, the beauty of this patty lies not just in its heat resistance, but in its ease of application. Applying it is smoother than eating a couple of scones with the afternoon tea, and you won't need a PhD to figure it out. Think of it as your mold making BFF, always there when you need it, and it won't ghost you like that friend who owes you money. The curing time is when it flexes its muscles. It sets faster than a New Year resolution to hit the gym, meaning your masterpiece will be ready for action in no time. I just reused the old vacuum bags left over after the Prepreg curing by mixing the putty on it. I worked the patty together with the activator like an Italian granny works the pasta dough. Work it until the consistency becomes as smooth as bowls before a hot date. Adding the patty piece by piece onto the surface. I make sure I work the patty into the edges and corners so there are no air pockets. Also, the epoxy I applied helped me achieve this goal as the surface became extremely tacky. I let the whole thing fully cure, then I flipped it around and started building the barriers for the other side. Remove the filleting wax, attach the flute boards, fill the gaps and placed a few wax pyramids again. This side was a bit trickier because there were a lot of shapes, grooves and the first side of the bolt mounting, so I had to think and plan out how I would do this side. After letting the second part of my mold fully cure, I took off the barriers and jumped onto the other side of the mold build. That was the third side and the fourth side. I've done the same process on those sides. At this time I used some double-sided tape to help me secure down the flute boards. As soon as I evened out the filleting wax, I added an extra element, which was the two boards that had also been covered in a few layers of release agent. These bolts will help me to place the fasteners in place and build them into the carbon fiber. This way I can build mountings easily into the part straight away without redesigning it. I've done the same steps as before after the bolts got into their place. Gelcoat, laminating resin and moulding putty. Off camera, I placed the part into the oven for 5 hours at 50 degrees Celsius to make sure the mold was fully cured before I started drilling holes and grinding down the edges. I drilled the holes where the mold will be bolted together. The edges I ground down. Used the grinder and the diamond disc for that. Straight after started disassembling the mold. It came apart without any issues. I didn't have any parts sticking to the mold or pieces pitting down on the edges. Clean the whole thing with mold cleaner. I wanted to remove any release agent and filleting wax before the post-curing. I did not plan to polish the mold. I would like to clear coat the carbon part, which is good because I don't have to spend extra time on polishing. Also, I found it difficult to polish up a mold like this to have a mirror finish. Too many corners and edges make it very difficult. Reassembled the mold, bolted everything together, then placed it back in the oven. At the same time, I was post-curing another mold as well, which will help me to build the side fairing, but that will be in another video. The post-curing took a 12-hour process and the temperature was raised to 125 degrees Celsius at the end of the heat cycle. Using a chemical release agent is the next step. It is brushed on in 3 wet coats by brush. Applying a release agent might seem like a technical process, but it's also a bit like painting. As for application, it's more forgiving than a weekend at your grandmother's house. A thin coat is all it takes. It sticks to your mold like shit, creating a barrier that ensures your mold doesn't play hard to get when it is time to part away. Left every single coat to dry between each coat. After the last coat, I left it for at least an hour to dry before I started applying the Prepreg. I grabbed the offcuts of Prepreg from what was left after cutting out the shapes from the sheet for the additional layers. Then I started the carbon build, covering up the surface with random cuts of Prepreg. Gently press each piece into place, ensuring a secure bond. Many of the cuts overlapped each other. That wasn't an issue for me. I was only paying attention to the weaves placed against each other. When I was done with that, the next step was to debug the first layer. When you are working with Prepreg carbon fiber, which is essentially pre-impregnated with resin, debulking becomes a key process. So, when you are debulking, imagine you are crafting a sandwich, a carbon fiber sandwich if you will. Now, the first layer is like the bread, but instead of slapping it down carelessly, you want to give it a good, earthy pat to make sure all ingredients, or carbon fibers, are cozy and snug. That's essentially what debulking the first layer of Prepreg carbon fiber in the mold is all about. I was using a fresh vacuum bag for this step to make sure the bag won't be an issue during the debulking process. Place the parts into the bag covered with briefer cloth and perforated release film. Seal the bag and place it under negative pressure for at least an hour. Then I gently opened the bag as I'll be using it later on. I took the parts out and pulled the extra material of the molds. I started building up the carbon layers continuously till I reached the required thickness. After the first layer of randomly placed carbon fiber, I added 2 more layers of 210 gram Prepreg and 2 layers of 450 gram Prepreg. This is the side of the mold where I'll be attaching the fastener. To build it into the part, I had to wrap the nut around with the carbon fiber. I should have used this type of fastener, but I did not have an M6 in my toolbox. So I attempted this trick with the stainless steel nut. Place the nut between 2 flange nuts. Grabbed a piece of carbon fiber and wrapped it around with it very tight. Doesn't matter if you pull the fibers, you just want it as tight as possible. My guide height was the flanges of the side of the nuts. Then I took off the nut and separated the nut from the flange nuts. And voila! I had a piece of carbon fiber nut insert. I put the bolt, which is also covered in the release agent, through the mold and tighten on the nut covered with carbon fiber. Then attach the 2 molds and secure them with some extra carbon fiber in the split lines and over the bolts. Join the last pieces together and secured everything down with bolts nice and tight. I placed some extra briefer cloth over the bolts poking out to make sure they won't poke a hole in my bag. With some extra masking tape, I masked off the split lines on the outside of the mold to stop leaking out the resin of the Prepreg under vacuum during the curing time. Place the unperforated release film over the carbon and also secure that with some masking tape. What can I say? I love masking tape. I used some carpet spray adhesive and stuck the briefer cloth into place. The next day the part had been cured in my oven. The curing process is where the good stuff happens. Follow the manufacturer's recommendation for the temperature and time, and you'll have a solid cured carbon fiber piece ready for action. My heat cycle started at 60 degrees Celsius. After that I raised the temperature to 70 degrees for 3 hours. Then I finished up the curing at 120 degrees for 2 hours. I love unwrapping the mold after curing. Can't wait to see how the part will turn out. But also I am shitting my pants big time because I'm scared of destroying the mold or the carbon part. Anything could happen, like if I didn't pay enough attention to a little detail during the build. My part would end up in the bin. Alright, I think I didn't mess it up. Everything seems alright and looks good. A few pinholes on the surface, but nothing serious. The part will be clear coated, so I don't mind those pinholes. On the first try, it looks great. I cleaned up the part using a tungsten carbide disc and a small sanding drum. On the back side, I grounded down the carbon fiber ahead of time to bond 2 mounting pins I 3D printed. Only the mold had a couple of coats of release agent to ensure the adhesive wouldn't bond to the mold. Both the plastic and carbon fiber surface should be thoroughly cleaned to remove contaminants such as dust, grease or release agent. Surface roughening or treatment necessary to enhance adhesion. I was using this MMA adhesive to bond the pins to the carbon fiber. This VM100 I found a very reasonable structural adhesive. After applying the adhesive, the plastic clamped together with 2 bolts on each side. The curing time, temperature and pressure are critical factors that influence the bond strength. Luckily, this 2-component adhesive has a very good curing time of around 8 hours, but to make sure it is fully cured I left the part overnight. Now let's see the weight difference between the original part and the carbon fiber. The aluminium part is 310 grams and the carbon part is 114 grams. So I have a solid 196 grams saved, which means I can smash down a couple of extra burgers tonight. I don't have to worry about gaining any extra weight on the bike. It was all worth it at the end. Next up, I start assembling together the gauge cluster and the bracket. I'm very happy with how this build turned out. The texture of the carbon fiber is unique and captivating. The woven pattern not only serves a functional purpose in reinforcing the material, but also adds a layer of visual interest. Knowing that the material is not only aesthetically pleasing, but also robust and long-lasting adds to the overall appreciation.
Tell you really what it is, but you got it. Makeup in the morning, you got dresses in your closet, but you grab them tight, you in love with being modest. You a move body giving centrifuges, I'm just saying I'm amused, but you ain't even flexing. and you cool.
If you like this video, please hit the subscribe and the thumbs up button to impress the algorithm, because that's all that matters at the end of the day. Thanks so much for watching, see you in the next one.
Inside the moss. Words cut deep, it's like a sword.